We're talking with Dave Phillips, who is a recent inductee into the 2020 class of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Dave's a Catholic Central guy, and Dave, first of all, thanks for talking with us. Appreciate the opportunity, and welcome to the conversation.
Hello. Good to talk.
Dave, the easiest thing to do to start is I've always found it easiest to start from the beginning. So for you, kind of talk a little bit where you grew up and where lacrosse kind of crossed your path.
So I grew up in Birmingham, Bloomfield area. I went to Bloomfield public schools through 9th grade, and then in 10th grade I went to Detroit Country Day. I was recruited to play hockey at Country Day, so I played football, hockey, and lacrosse for a gentleman. My football, my lacrosse coach, my academic advisor was Gene Riley, who was the head, obviously, lacrosse coach at Country Day.
He was instrumental in a lot of lives, was he not?
He was, and so we've been through this, but so I see Gene Riley, a group of Country Day guys, goes down and plays golf in Greenville, South Carolina, which is where Gene lives most of the year. In the summer or in the winters, he's down in Florida. So when we're down there playing golf, we actually have Gene Riley come and have dinner with us one night. And I told Gene last year that he was the most influential man in my life outside of my father.
Talk about why.
You got to love it. So when I went to Country Day, Gene kind of knew that I wasn't thrilled to be there, and he kind of understood where I was coming from. Kind of took me under his wing a little bit. Was a very good leader, and then my junior and senior year, when I started getting recruited to play hockey and lacrosse, he kind of helped me navigate that path, which my father had never been through any of that. So Gene was very helpful in kind of driving me down the right avenue.
He was a bit of a cerebral coach at a time when there were more yellers like Vince Lombardi. Is that fair?
That's very fair. He was not a yeller and a screamer, and I would say in my first years I kind of was. So
yeah. What made you pick up a stick? I know from talking to some folks, you had some baseball background.
Yeah, so I was a very good baseball player, and I actually played baseball probably for 2 weeks at Country Day my sophomore year, which was my first year at Country Day.
Right.
I had a couple buddies, Rob Ambrose being one of them, that was playing lacrosse, and that just looked like more fun. So my sophomore year, I went on, played midfield my sophomore year, and I was an okay player. I played varsity, I lettered, but I wouldn't consider myself a great player. My junior year, I figured some things out. I had a really successful season, both in Michigan and in the Midwest. I was, I think, a top 3 scorer as a junior, and then I led the Midwest Lacrosse Elastic Association, I think it was called back in those days. My senior year, I led that entire league in scoring. So I figured some stuff out my junior and senior years. Scored a lot of goals, and it got to be a lot more fun when you can do some stuff.
You a midfielder and attack?
Played attack. My midfielder my sophomore year, and played attack my junior and senior years.
What was your skill? Speed or toughness or all the above?
I was not. I would say I had a pretty good roll dodge, and I could shoot left-handed coming off the right-handed start. So I scored a lot of goals starting as a righty, rolling into my left hand and firing it.
Any box experience in those days as a hockey player?
No, never played box lacrosse.
No?
Not at all.
As a hockey player, I thought that would be a staple.
Yeah, when it was back in those days, I was a 3-sport athlete. You were football in the fall, hockey in the winter. There was a little bit of overlap, and then lacrosse in the spring. And then my first 2 years of high school, I played baseball in the summer still. So
I think people have to remember that there was a real division between American hockey and Canadian hockey, in the sense that if you went overseas, in this case you went across the bridge, the Canadian world was box in the summer, hockey in the winter.
Yep.
Here you tended to play other sports, and most of the time box for the Canadians was just to fill up the Windsor Memorial Arena in the summertime to make a little extra rent money. That's really what happened. And that's
I honestly, I never played box lacrosse. I played a lot of field, even even after college, and never once did I play box lacrosse.
You mentioned Rob Ambrose. You had some pretty good players at Country Day when you played there.
Well, Rob and I had the ball probably 85% of the time back in those days.
Was Dave Morrow a country day guy?
David Morrow? No, David Morrow was a Brother Rice guy.
Oh, okay.
David Morrow actually played hockey for me at Honeybaked.
Which is a program that you were instrumental in starting, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Lou Schmidt and I started the Honeybaked program in 1981. And David Morrow played for us in 1986. And oddly enough, I gave Mr. Morrow, David's dad, his first 2 lacrosse sticks.
Is that right?
At the Cranbrook Arena. Remember it well.
Wow. It's going back a couple years.
It's 1986, so I don't know how many that years, 43 years.
Well, high school off to Miami of Ohio, where you were a hockey player.
Yep. So I actually, originally I was going to go to Bowling Green to play lacrosse. And so Jim Plant was the coach at Bowling Green. I wanted to play hockey more than I wanted to play lacrosse, but I wasn't getting the love from colleges that I was for lacrosse. So when I went, and Ron Mason, who was a long, Hall of Fame coach for Michigan State in hockey, I wanted to walk on the hockey team, and they keep in mind they had just won back-to-back national championships, so they were really good. He would not even talk to me. So really? I got a little upset, and so I said, you know what? I don't want to go to Bowling Green. Steve Cady was a coach at Miami at the time, and he was recruiting me, so I pulled the shoot on BG, and BG in 1976 lost to North Carolina in the national championship game in Division I lacrosse. I bet not a lot of people know that.
Say that again?
Bowling Green lost to North Carolina in the Division I national championship in lacrosse.
Yeah, it's when at the same time Michigan State had a team. There were some.
Yeah,
teams
Michigan State was playing varsity, but BG was really good.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how good that Bowling Green was.
They were outstanding, and 2 years later, the program was dropped.
Yeah,
and I don't know what caused all that.
If you go back through it and you look at Bowling Green, you look at a number of universities that dropped it in that 7 or 8 year period. It seems to be Title IX has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
And when Title IX came in, it kind of equaled the landscape because it wasn't a dollar for a dollar anymore. So everybody moved forward, from that standpoint. Now you left Miami to go and come back home and finish.
Yeah, so I played hockey first semester freshman year. I got hurt, couldn't play my second semester, went back and started out my sophomore year and got hurt again. Then I just went downhill at Miami from there. So I just decided to come home and started at Wayne State. So I went another 3+ years at Wayne State to finish my degree. So in the meantime, I'm living at home with my folks. I had a younger brother who was a hockey player, and so we got Lou Schmidt, who was the Honeybaked guy, he also played lacrosse football and hockey at Country Day. And so we started the Honeybaked program in '81. So I was already doing a little bit of coaching. When I came home that spring, I had helped Country Day a little bit on their JV lacrosse team, and I had also helped Pat Carmichael, who was the JV hockey coach at Country Day. So I helped him out a little bit too. So Gene Riley knew I was in town. The way the whole Catholic Centrals thing actually got started is that there was 2 students by the name of John Morris and Rich Crom, who were Country Day students who transferred to Catholic Central. They wanted to start lacrosse at Catholic Central, so they went to the AD, whose name is Bob Santello. Bob told them, you find a coach and you find an inside school monitor. We'll see what we can do. So they called Gene Riley. Gene Riley called me. I went and met with the 4 of them. We got a gentleman who's a history teacher at Catholic Central by the name of Jim Eddy, who decided to take on the role of the in-school monitor. And away we went.
Well, you're 21. There are 4 teams. There are 4 teams in the state at that point.
5 now, counting Catholic Central.
Catholic Central, there are 5. This is before the next year you join Midwest the next year. But how do you start? You have no equipment. What was the first set of equipment? I mean, how did you start
it? So the first thing we had to do was figure out how to equip 30 players. So that was kind of the number that we decided to get. So we bought 30 sticks, and back in those days, the only place to get lacrosse equipment was from Olympic Sporting Goods.
Right.
It was at 8 Mile and Telegraph, somewhere right in that area. So we got 30 sticks. And then we ordered all the equipment. So we ordered the helmets, the gloves, the arm pads, shoulder pads, all that. But for the next, and again, so I didn't start this whole operation till mid-February. Probably season starts mid-March. So
you're a late hire.
I was a late hire. We're behind the 8 ball for sure. So we hold a meeting at the school,
right,
to see who's interested in playing lacrosse. I expected 20 kids, maybe 30 show up. We had almost 150 kids. So I said, okay, we're going to have tryouts, right? Because we got 30 sticks. That's how many people we could take. So we divided the tryouts alphabetically by class. So we had hour sessions for the next, I don't know, probably we went through the weekends even for tryouts just to try and filter it down. Made a couple of cuts, ended up with 30 guys. I did not take any seniors my first year, just because it didn't make a lot of sense to do that because we were building for the next year. So we had a few freshmen, a few sophomores, and then a bunch of juniors. So I was telling you the story before. So we got our equipment 2 days before our first game. We played against Roger Bunton at L'Anse Creuse North. Take the bus over there. Line up for the first face-off for the first game. The referee blows the whistle, and I got 10 guys going for the ball. So we never got to the rule part where it said only the middies can go for the ball. So, it was a kind of learn as you go type thing for not only for the kids but for us as well. So we had a lot to cover in the 2 days we had equipment.
You got 30 sticks and plus 100 athletes.
So the first 2 weeks were 100%, scooping without contact and fundamentals, throwing and catching.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong. The practice field that you eventually ended up on, I had a chance to play in that in the later days when it was still in Redford. It was at best a bomb shelter field. I mean, I'm sure you were glad to have it, but
yeah. So about
that field.
So the fields were a challenge, and I can give you a couple stories here. So when we first started, we played at Bell Creek Park at 5 Mile and Inkster. And that also happened to be the soccer field for Catholic Central.
Right.
So they had a storage shed where they could store stuff in there. And it was big enough that we could get our goals in there. And a couple other names I need to mention here before I go any further. So I mentioned Jim Eddy already, but John Van Antwerp was also by my side. I mean, without him, we're not having this conversation.
He was
your Country Day grad from '74. Right?
He was your JV coach.
He was the JV coach along with Jim Eddy, who I also already mentioned, who was the in-school guy. The other guy who was also in the Hall of Fame is Dave Murray. So Dave Murray's son was a freshman in '81. He built our goals for us. He was really, really helpful in a lot of different facets of getting that program started. So back to Bell Creek. So Dave Murray makes our goals. And Country Day gave us goals, actually, until Dave had the opportunity to build these things. So John and I had to line the fields. We had to cut the grass. We had to do all of the field maintenance and everything. I had no staff to do any of that stuff. So we did it all. So for 2 years we were at Bell Creek, and then you mentioned the field at Catholic Central, and it was terrible. Field perspective, honestly, it was terrible. But we were so excited to get it because it was right next to the school, and we got some students to come out to our games. Plus, I actually rented a house at the time, right at the end of that field on Breakfast Drive. So the fields were always a challenge. And I can tell you one other story, and this is in 1985. We used to travel. We used to do the Midwest travel with Brother Ice, and we would go down and play Arlington and Worthington, or they would come up here and play us. So one year, and this was 85. Upper Arlington was supposed to be the best team in the Midwest. They couldn't make it up to play that weekend in Detroit, but they said they could meet us at Bowling Green. It's okay. It's my home game. So John Van Antwerp and I go down. We cut the grass, and so we'll meet you at BG. So if you've ever driven down I-75, where the football stadium is, there's a big field in between I-75, the road, and the football stadium. So Lee Switzer was the lacrosse coach at Arlington at the time. He said, I'll get in touch with Bowling Green and we can arranged to get that field. So Don and I go down there. It looks terrible. We have to cut the grass. We have to line a field with no lines on it at all. And the wind is blowing and it's raining. We have a ball of string and a little chalk thing. So we line that field. We play Arlington. We win 6-5 in overtime. And Switzer protests the game because he said the field wasn't perfectly square and it affected his ride. I said, you got to be kidding me. So that went nowhere. He lost that protest, but it was just a funny field story with no staff.
Now, you mentioned Dave Murray and Dave Murray's goals. I think the thing we should point out here is that he literally built them out of plumbing piping.
He was a plumbing contractor, so I mean,
the goals weighed probably 100 pounds apiece. They were so large and so heavy.
Yeah, at least.
Some of those goals are still being used. Believe it or not, they're still being used in Waterford because they're like rocks.
Yeah, I don't see them. No lacrosse ball is going to break them, but
no.
Those things are structured forever.
And if you run into one, it'd kill you.
yeah, they were durable. They were always a challenge too, because one year we actually so Catholic Central was at, let's say, 5 Mile and Beach, right? So one year we had to play at Heinz Park. So I drove an F-Series truck, so I would have to go to the storage shed, pick up the goals. The kids would throw them in the back of my truck, and I'd drive them down to Heinz Park, and we'd unload them. We had a lot of field issues back in the day. It was a challenge.
That was the nature of the beast. I was a St. Bernardine's kid in what was then Westland, Aiken Township. So CYO leagues in those days had to play wherever they could because they didn't have their own facilities.
Yep.
And sometimes we had an end zone out on Edward Hines Drive. We had an end zone on one of the parks that was actually the parking lot. So we caught the ball at certain spots. You had to dodge the rocks. So,
you got to have a field.
It's all relative, just that. 81, 82, and 85, you were the state coach of the year. And yes. You made it to the state finals 82, 83, 85, and 86. So from 81 to 82, and again, I'm not diminishing, you had 5 teams. But the reality is you came on pretty quick because some of those other teams had been around a while. Las Cruz.
Yes. So our class of 8, our graduating class of 82, we had some really, really significantly good athletes. Jim Bellinger went on to play lacrosse at Army, had a good 4-year career. Tim Hoffman went to Ohio Wesleyan, was a 2-time All-American Division III. John Morse was our goaltender, who went on to play at Harvard, and he was the first All-American from Catholic Central. Steve Pavlock was another one, so he was a junior that year in the class of 82, but he was an All-American in 83. So we had some really good athletes and some really good speed and physicality that we could play with back in those days. So the class of 82 indeed had some success in Michigan, but we lost to Worthington by 1. We lost to Arlington by 1, and we beat Sewickley in overtime 6-5, which could be one of the best athletic experience I've ever had. Having
athletes, which is what you had in 81 to start with 30 sticks.
Yep.
In the state final in 82, obviously that you're looking at when you have the athletes, coaching comes into that discussion, but they must have picked it up pretty quick, which is the idea of having athletes.
Well, it's a lot easier to teach a really good athlete stick skills and ground ball prowess. And, again, you'll hear this a lot, but back in the 80s, the ball was on the ground a lot more than it is today because there was no feeder system for a lot of these schools. Right. So every year, a couple of those names I mentioned, the first time they picked up a lacrosse stick was their senior year. So really good athletes, you give them a stick, they pick it up, you kind of got something. So particularly on the defensive end of the field.
Sure. 86, you've had this 6-year run of being very successful from scratch to being one of the better teams in the state, if not the best team in the state. And you kind of take a step out, and haven't been back because your background is coaching hockey. And that's where you've been. Did you not miss it at all? Apparently not. You should have gone back to it, but
no. I did. I missed it, and so it was. Trust me, it was hard. But so a little bit on the background there. So I graduated from college in '83. So the first 2 years, I was actually going to school while I was doing all this coaching. So I actually took a job selling insurance post-graduation so that I could coach lacrosse. So for the next 3 years, I didn't want to be an insurance guy, but I did want to coach lacrosse. And so I was a mechanical engineer by academic background. Any job that I would have taken there would have not allowed me to coach lacrosse. So by 1986, I was getting married in the fall of '86. I dated the same girl for 8 years, and it was time to kind of get on with life a little bit.
Right.
So I had to get into my field of work. So I took a job in automotive sales, and the rest is history, because you can coach hockey at night, but lacrosse is after school, basically. So it didn't allow me to do that. But yes, indeed, I did miss it.
I know that Dave Wilson, who's the current CC coach, came at sort of the end of your tenure at CC. He beat him. The connection is that with Dave to Rob, not Rob coaching at the time, but CC beats Brother Rice a year ago. That had to have been a highlight in the Phillips home, I would think.
Yeah, it's been a while for sure, and again, I can go back a little bit with the Rob Ambrose and I. So Rob graduated from college in '82, and he was back local again. So we had a lot of success with lacrosse just in a 2-year period at Catholic Central. So I think in '83 is when I said, Rob, let's get Brother Ice going. You're not, he was working for his dad at the time, and let's get it going. So that's when Brother Ice started. I think it was 1983. So we had a pretty good a friend rivalry to go with the already Brother Ice Catholic Central rivalry. So that kind of sparked, I think, and then De La Salle picked it up, I think, the following year. So we started to kind of see the growth start taking place. It still took a while after that, and I was out of it, so I don't really know how the progression and the growth came the next 20 years. But we see a lot of it now. We did a lot of promotional work back in the 80s. I can remember sitting down with Norm Quinn, who was the AD at Bluefield Schools.
Yep.
And our sales pitch back in the day was, for $3,000, you can start a team of 30. So $100 a kid. You don't have to rent ice. You just find a field to play on, get some goals, get some equipment, and at the time was way less expensive than it is to equip a kid with all the correct equipment than it is today.
Do we have you to thank then for Rob Ambrose ending up at Brother Ice?
You have me to thank for Rob Ambrose being up at Brother Ice. So Rob and I, we were teammates at Country Day. We were at each other's weddings. So we were very, very good. Particularly at that time, we were really, really good friends.
What a lot of folks don't know is that he was there 3 years, left, and then came back to take over. Ron Ebert being in the middle of that. Ron's early years weren't the success that you think of him as being the ultimate high school coach, but he struggled to start like everybody else.
Yeah. So I'm trying to recall. So Rob started. I think he was there 83, 4, 5. And then I think Ron Hebert came in probably for the next 3 years, and then Ambrose came back.
Yeah.
Something like that. I don't recall for sure, but.
Well, you guys were instrumental in getting this thing to get the explosion. By the time we got to 88, 89, 90, it really almost multiplied by 2 times from that point forward.
Yeah, and that was very fun for me to see too. And I recall, like, there was if I go back in time a little bit, John Fillion was in my class of '82 at Catholic Central. He went on to coach the Farmington Unified team. I think Kelly Kroll coached at Novi for a while. So some of our old Catholic Central players were starting to find themselves into the coaching ranks in these high schools that were just starting programs, which is, for me, that was kind of cool.
In talking with some of your former players and some of the former acquaintances, they seem to think that your hallmark was taking kids with a little lesser ability and maybe turning them on to something that maybe they had some success at.
Yeah, I guess I'm a fan of the underdog, both in lacrosse and hockey. If you could take a kid that might not have had this chance and make something out of them, and to this day, I still, for hockey, and back even in those days in lacrosse, if we can help a kid that might not otherwise have an opportunity to go to a school and play a game they love. If that can happen for a kid, that's what makes me tick, I guess. I love doing it. I love seeing kids that may not have otherwise had a chance to go to a unique school or a special school, or get into a school that they might not otherwise have been able to get into and play a game you love. That's what I like.
Well, if you look at Country Day and you look at Brother Rice and you look at CC, they've had such athletic success over the last, 20 years. It's been almost unprecedented in how successful they've been. So a lot of
In all sports. In all sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Certainly in lacrosse. And I think they've done really well. So is there anything we're missing that I should have asked?
Well, when we talked earlier, we talked about the Belichick thing.
Yeah.
So Bill Belichick came out, and the way that story goes, so Bill was a Connecticut Wesleyan graduate, and he played against Kevin Spencer, who was our assistant lacrosse coach at Country Day at the time. So those two played a college football and lacrosse against each other. Kevin actually went on to be the Arizona Cardinals special teams coach for 20 years.
Wow. Didn't know that.
So, and at the time, Monty Clark, who was the head coach of the Detroit Lions, his kids all went to Country Day. So Belichick was coaching the defensive backs, I think, for the Lions at the time. He was looking for a place to come in, and so he came, honestly, Gene Riley tells the story. He came walking up to Country Day with a stick one day and said, "Can I help?" So lo and behold, at the time he was Coach Bill. He was an attack guy. So he was kind of my personal coach. And so, back then he was just Coach Bill. I think he was 23 years old and I was 17, 18. And he talked me into taking my arm pads off. With the thought process was that if they're trying to smack your arms and hurt your arms, they lose focus and you can beat them. I said, okay, arm pads are gone. Hurt my arms. I had some success.
So there were some Belichick isms even in those days.
Yep. He was, and again, he was kind of my personal coach at the time because Gene was the head coach, Kevin Spencer coached the D, and Belichick coached the attack, and I had the ball a lot.
That's cool. Well, listen, Dave, first of all, congratulations on being inducted, when you're one of those, sort of the fathers of all the things we do now. That's an honor and well-deserved one. So I want to congratulate you on that. And I want to just thank you for taking the time to spend with us, and just the best of luck.
For sure. I'm looking forward to the 23rd and seeing some old friends and guys like Roger Bunton and Don Lutz. Hopefully they're going to be in attendance. I haven't seen those guys since '86 when I left. Yeah. Art Hoffman's a good friend of mine. I haven't seen Art in a long time. I suspect Bob Dowd will be there. So I hope to get to see some of these guys and like we talked about before, tell some stories and some lies along the way.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the 23rd.
All right. So.